We wanted to bring you an update on a story that I think is really important and which has been, it has actually gotten a little bit of mainstream coverage, but mostly kind of falls under the radar. And I think it's an important one to highlight here. So let's go and put this up on the screen. This has been reported out by The Intercept. They've done a good job in covering this trial of animal rights activists. Here's the headline. They say activists acquitted in trial for taking piglets from Smithfield Foods. The nation's largest pork producer argued the removal of 2 sick piglets was a case of theft and burglary. And this activist organization called Direct Action Everywhere called it a rescue. So let me give you the backstory here. Basically, you have this group, Direct Action Everywhere, and they take really quite courageous actions, direct actions, as the name implies, to expose the horrors of factory farms. In particular, they gained access to this farm in Utah. It's a pig farm where you had the female pigs, the sows, put into these crates that are so small they can't even move or turn around. Okay, this is after they supposedly were getting rid of these crates and they weren't doing that anymore. Well, they go into this farm and all of the female pigs are in these types of crates. But it gets so much worse. The horrors of this place, which they were able to video and document, are so extreme. You had dead piglets piled up behind the mothers. You had mothers and just sitting there, rotting, and live ones there amongst their dead litter mates. You had mothers whose teats were ripped apart and bleeding because they were unable to produce enough milk, and you had these starving piglets trying to nurse and suckle. I mean, just absolutely disgusting, filthy, horrific, inhumane things that were happening there that they were able to document. So as part of this action, they saw these 2 piglets that were close to death, dramatically underweight, there amidst their dead siblings. And they decided they were going to rescue these 2 piglets. Now, for Smithfield Farms, and this particular farm is part of the larger Smithfield brand, which, side note, is now owned by China. Interesting part of the story, but that's another story for another day. So they ordinarily, they have apparently a lot of these dead piglets, which is horrifying in and of itself, and they dispose them and they have no commercial value to them. But they wanted to argue that this was a theft and a burglary and that these activists should be charged and they should be thrown in prison for rescuing the 2 piglets that have zero commercial value ultimately to Smithfield Farms. The activists said, no. This is like if you have a dog in a hot car that is in distress and you go save it.
Yes.
That's what this is akin to. And their strategy here is actually to sort of provoke these legal conflicts so that they can establish by precedent that there is what they call a right to rescue, where if you see these animals that are in clear distress and on the verge of death, you're actually allowed to rescue them from this facility. And as The Intercept points out here, ultimately, they were victorious. Now, the crazy thing also about this story is the fact that the amount of federal government resources that were dedicated to returning these 2 piglets. Across state lines, you had multiple FBI agents on this. I mean, think of all of the crime and the things that are going on in the country. And the federal government was devoting massive resources to tracking down these piglets and DNA testing them and taking this thing to trial. Why? Well, because, they're looking out for the interests of big business, of the factory farm industry. And so that's why they care. Even in Smithfield Farms estimations, even at maximum, they said these pigs were worth like $40. And you have these huge FBI, federal government resources being spent on this case. So there's a lot of elements here. I mean, the creativity and I think the bravery of the tactics, the novel legal interpretations, and the fact that they were able to win in court in Utah, a very conservative place, of course. And then the fact that you have the federal government just siding with big business in such an overt and egregious way makes it, I think, a really interesting and revealing story about the way the country works.
Yeah, and we actually interviewed some of the people involved. So let's go ahead and take a listen to our old interview.
As to my prosecution, I was charged with multiple charges, felony burglary charge for, at one point I removed a sick, dying piglet that was of no value to this company, and I faced up to 5 years in prison for that. I was also charged under an ag law. Yeah, and And as I mentioned, there was an FBI investigation. At one point, they approached this truck driver who had came to us, and they threatened to prosecute him.
Ag-gag laws are completely insane, and that also just highlights like the collusion between big food and specifically the factory farming industry and the state to have them basically be their goon enforcers to cover up what our whole food supply chain is. I mean, just think, look, factory farming, you could debate it for a long time, but let's all just be real about what it is and what's going on here.
Yeah.
Like, where does your food come from? A lot of people should know. It doesn't just magically appear in the grocery store.
And here's what I think is important as well. Like these, they're called, I think, gestational crates. These sows are being kept in, which are so unbelievably like cruel and torturous for all like the moms and the babies that are involved. Those have been banned in a lot of countries. They've been banned in some states as well. So not all factory farming is created equal. There are more and less humane ways that you can go about this. So, sometimes it feels impossible in these sorts of situations to make any sort of positive change because you're like, listen, people are going to eat meat. It's going to be an ugly process. Like, ultimately, it's going to be horrible for the animals that are involved. But there are better and worse ways that this can be done. Smithfield had said they were getting rid of these crates. They clearly had not done that, and these activists were very courageous in ultimately exposing what was going on here. Just on the government piece of this, to underscore some of what we were saying, this is from the Intercept article. One of the activists involved here said that approximately 8 FBI agents had been on this case. Now, during the trial, one of the activists pressed the government on whether any other theft cases involving less than $100 worth of property had multiple FBI agents working on them. The government acknowledged they could not think of a single one in which the FBI had devoted 8 agents to tracking down goods worth less than $100 at best. And ultimately, what the jury decided was that these were of zero commercial value to Smithfield because these piglets were going to die and they were just going to get tossed in the dumpster. So anyway, government, shilling for big business as per usual, and a rare win for the activists who took this to trial and really exposed something important here. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.